if you want to show a web page in your SwiftUI apps, you don't have a native component for this, and you need to drop down to UIKit and work with WebKit to create a web view. In order to work with these UI views inside of SwiftUI, you need to use the UIViewRepresentable, and in this video I'm going to show you how to implement this and some of the nuances, especially when it comes to data passing back and forth between the UI view component and your SwiftUI apps. Now, as an example, I am going to continue working on a demo project, which is a web reading list app, where I have here a list of websites that I want to show. If I go to the detail view, this then loads these URLs with this web page. You can also further navigate to other elements. We can add buttons to go back to the last page or forward in this navigation, also for loading. And here I'm also showing the new URL of the currently shown one. I started already working on this app in the first parts of the series. It's just this reading list, and I need to implement this web view. Now, there are some more things that happen with this updating that is a little bit different. For example, if you're using on an iPad and navigation web view and you see both of these columns, because the way we update these web view here is a little bit different. That is why I'm also going to show you this. You see all of why are these functions there and what they're doing and what is called when. Now this app, I'm going to continue working on this project where I have here this navigation split view. In the sidebar I have this reading list view. I can create here new items with a title and a URL. I can save them and then I can open them, and this is then shown here in this reading detail view where I have the URL, and we need to now load these URLs. So in this view folder, I'm creating a new subgroup for WebView. We now create a file where we can interface with UIViewRepresentable. So here I create a new file from template, SwiftUI view. This is a web view. Now the API that I'm going to use is WebKit. When you're working here with UI views in SwiftUI, I don't work with views directly. I have to have this bridge, which is UIViewRepresentable. So I'm going to take out this, and I'm uncommenting here my preview for now. We are currently not conforming to UIViewRepresentable. The things that you have to implement are the make UI view from context, and in this case I am working with WKWebview, so this WebKit view is called WKWebview. I create here a new one, and this is actually the one that I'm also here, this type I'm going to here return. So this is the UI view component that is inside of this SwiftUI web view. So this is what I'm returning here. The second one is a update function. These are the minimal requirements. Now, in this case, I didn't really do anything because I only have here this empty web view that doesn't actually know the URL. So first of all, I need to pass here into the URL that we want to show. So I create a let URL property, and in the make function, I'm now going to load this URL. So I start with view, is this WKWebview. Then this web view has a function load with a URL request, which I can generate from this new URL. And this is the view that I actually here return. So I create this view, I customize it, and then I return it in this function. Now let's see if I can make this work with the preview. So here I need to pass a URL. I create one from google.com, and you see this is loading Google search. You can try this with another site, just something that we can preview nicely. Now this is the most basic one. And you see, I didn't actually use this update UI view function. In order to explain this, I need to actually demo this together with the rest of the app. So this web view I'm now going to use in my reading detail view. This is where I was supposed to add this web view, because here I have a URL. So I can add this web view for the reading URL. So this is used in the detail view of this navigation split view. And we're going to build and run this now. So I can show you this on an iPhone first. So first I see here my main view. Now I can press on one of these tabs, which opens the detail. And then we see here this website coming up. It was white for quite a while. This is because it was loading it. I probably for my app want to improve this and show a loading indicator so the user knows I am actually doing something. It's not just blank. When I go back, this view disappears. When I go to another one, then a new web view is created and this one again loads this. So this is working nicely for an iPhone. Now, if I do the same for an iPad, I click here on this item. This is loading the apple.com. Then if I switch to another one, you see nothing happens. That is because in this specific case, this web view is always shown. I'm always showing this web view. What's changing is the URL. And in this case, whenever one of these properties here changes, the update UI view function is called. And for a split view, we need to now use also the update UI view function. So I would then need to do the same. This UI view loads this URL from this request. I am additionally going to add here print statements so you see how many times this is actually called. For the make UI view and the update UI view. So I stop and build again. I select one of these items. And we see we are calling make UI view and update UI view. And I am here loading this actually twice, which it also doesn't really like. So we need to figure out how to improve this updating. And now when I select one of the other tabs, you see the update UI view is called. And I am actually updating here and loading this other page. Same when I go to another tab, then it updates again. So how do I make sure that I don't call these load URL too often? We can actually check what the UI view's current URL is. So this is the current URL. It's optional because maybe I didn't set anything. So if I have something else, if I didn't have a current URL, then I definitely should load this. But if I have something currently, I don't want to load the same page again, because otherwise I get some updating issues later on. So then I can check and compare if the current URL is not the one that I have here for getting from upstairs, then I load the new one also. Like this, and make sure that I don't load the same page all over again. So we try again. If you're only working on an iPhone, you probably don't need to worry about this updating UI view, because in this cases stack, when you have it as a navigation stack, every time I go here to the detail, a new view is created and this make function is called. So you don't need to worry about this updating. This is just more if you're working in navigation split views, where this web view is always shown. So it's only made once. This make function is only called once. Okay, now I said that I would like to show the user that I'm actually loading something and not just these white views. How do I know what my web view is actually doing? Is it loading? Is it navigating to something else? In UIKit and AppKit, there's a certain pattern of communication of getting this information with these views, and this is delegate patterns. When you want to work with UIViewRepresentable and delegates, because here have a struct and delegates need to be with classes, so this has to work in a certain way where I have to use a coordinator. So in this UIViewRepresentable, I create a nested type, which is my coordinator. I'm here making this conform to VK navigation delegate. This class has a parent where I get here this web view and an initializer where I set this. Now it's complaining again that I don't conform to this protocol. That is because I need to add another function for make coordinator. And this is then creating one of these coordinators, and I'm here passing myself. So this helps then from the coordinator. Here I have the parents and all these properties. Now, so far I didn't change anything, but I want to now take advantage of this delegate. if we have a look at the documentation, you can use this to track the progress of requests and to respond to errors and authentication challenges. And I'm going to open the documentation. And down here you see the functions that we get from this delegate under the section tracking the loading progress of a request. So we can implement the did start provision and navigation, did receive, did commit, and did finish. For example, this function did finish is called when we finish loading the website. So this I could use to track if I'm still loading or I'm finished loading. And the did start provision and navigation I can use to say, oh, I'm starting here loading something. So here inside of this coordinator, I can now implement this function and get information when certain things happening, when I start navigating, when I finish navigating. So I'm starting with did start provisioning navigation. I'm trying to write them in the way they are called also. Then I want to use the WebView did commit and the WebView did fail with error. This is, for example, when something didn't happen correctly, we get here the error information, which we might also want to show something back to the user where they don't see anything. And the WebView did finish. So this is the one when we are finished loading. Now I'm going to, just for testing purposes, so I can demo to you that something's happening, I'm going to add here some print statements. Okay, I'm just going to print here some of this, which functions are called. And now that I have here this delegate implemented, I actually need to make myself the delegate. So this is always declaring this coordinator to be really this coordinator, this delegate. So here I can say the context coordinator is the views navigation delegate. And I should do this the opposite direction. So I'm setting the navigation delegate of this view to my coordinator so that these functions are actually called. Okay, and now I can test this build and run, and we see what happens with this navigation. I select one of these tabs, and you see I first go through the make this UI view, then the update where I actually load this. And then these delegates are called. Starting with here, this did start provision and navigation. This is because I'm starting loading something. Then we have this did commit and did finish. So I can now use these for this loading state. And where do I want to show this loading indicator? I actually want to put this one level higher in this reading list. So on top of here, I want to add a progress view, but only if I'm loading. So here I'm adding a is loading property, which is a bool. And actually in this case, I want to propagate this value because I'm setting this from here to these properties, and then I'm showing it one level higher. So I can't just make this here let, I need to properly pass this, and I have to use one of these mechanisms in SwiftUI, which is a binding. Then I have to here update this, fix, and we're using add state for the preview state. Add previewable, this helps me with just the preview. Bar is loading, and then I can use this here. Now this property I want to set whenever these functions are called. So I said that did start provisioning. I want to change the parents properties. The parent is then here this WebView from the coordinator's point of view. So this is this WebView is loading to true. And when we're here finishing, we're setting this to false. Okay, now I can go to my reading detail view where I wanted to show this, and here I declare this as a state because this is the highest level where I want to see this. Var is loading. This I can then bind to my subview where I get this then the view that gives me this information. And here I can show a loading indicator. So on a Z stack, I show if is loading a progress view with a control view size of large. In order to see this, I adjust this true property. See this indicator, we can also change I can also set the tint to the accent color. And now let's see what I did. And then I set this back to false here as loading. If I look now at the live preview, you see it's flickering a lot. This indicates that I have an updating live cycle, reference cycle, where I'm updating and continuously updating. So something with my update functions didn't work. In order to see this, I build and run. So we see the print statements. And I go to the WebView where I created this issue. So I navigate to one of these sites. And you see I have this flickering and I continuously have here these print statements. Just go back to stop this. So I again and again call these update UIView function, which then starts to reload the whole process where we get this free provision of start navigation, did commit and did finish. So I did something wrong here with my update UIView function. And the problem is, this function is always called whenever one of your properties here changes. And in this case, because I am changing the isLoading property, so I change the URL here, which calls then the update function, which then loads this. Then I start here changing this isLoading, which then is this property. So then this update UI function is called again. Then I finish, then this one is again called and loading. Then you see I have a problem here with updating here. URL is loading, URL is loading, URL is loading. So this is pretty bad. And the one mistake that I made here is that I should not reload this every time. Right now I always load this. This if statement doesn't really make sense. So if I take out these here, now I am always checking, should I actually update this or not? If only if the URLs are different, then I update this. So I'm going to try this again, and hopefully we fix our reference updating cycle. So I navigate to the detail. You see shortly this loading indicator, and I have here this make view, update view. Then this did start provisioning is called, which changes the loading, which then is calling the update UI view. But because I am here already having the right URL, it's not calling anything again. And then I did commit, did finish. I changed my isLoading to false, which calls then this updating UI again. But because of the safety check, I don't do anything new. So I stop my little updating cycle. And when you do this, you really need to consider that anything that changes causes this update UI function to be called, which makes it quite difficult sometimes to have a back and forth communication here. The reason why they have this is so that it automatically properly updates it. Whatever I pass in here new causes update, for example, by URL. That's very useful if this properly works. Now I'm only showing this indicator a little bit later, but I actually want to do this when I actually call this isLoading function, then I might as well set this here. So because I don't want to set this actually two times, I create a reusable function, load, and here I am doing this. So I need to pass this view. This is a WKWebview. So I can call this one time from my updating function and one time from this load function. We can also just do this one time and remove this in the initial one, because this one anyway is called one of the other. And when I'm here, I'm also setting the isLoading to true. So it's faster showing this indicator. So we try again. I navigate to the detail. I should do this load function also on this, for this view, when I make this UI view. So now when I go to the detail, you see directly this loading indicator. As soon as this view appears, I have everything, I go back and I navigate to another view. So we have this nicely indicating now, without too much inefficiency. Now, similar to this loading, I want to also have the information if something failed. So we could do the same now and pass this information again, this error, so that I can then here my detail view also show these error cases. I would need to again pass this back and forth. And I'm starting to realize that passing this back and forth gets a little bit cumbersome because I have so many properties. And instead of having them one by one, I'm creating now a ViewModel that collects all this information so I can pass them all at once. So under ViewModel, I create another one from a Swift file. This is WebView state. I am using the same observation feature, observable. This is again a class, WebView state. And here I want to now have properties that we want to show. And one of them is the URL. This is var URL, optional, nil. Then I had the is loading, which is this bool. Initially it's not, so it's false. And then the error, which is an error, optional. We can also write initializers. For example, in this case, I start with just passing a URL. And from my web view, I want to update this property, so I'm just creating here functions that automatically do this. For example, updating the is loading and the error, optional, and for default this is nil, so I can use this for two situations. So self.isLoading is and self.error is this error. So we're starting again from the reading detail view. So here I want to have this is at state private var web view state. This loading is now coming from this web view state. And I actually want to use these whole thing also for handling this URL, so I don't want to extra pass them. So we need to now connect this because this reading item now has this data that I need to pass here, and I'm using an on change of the reading. Whenever this one changes, I'm setting the web view's URL to this new value. It's URL. And I also need to do this initially, so this is on appear. The web view states URL. This is the readings URL. And now here I'm going to pass this. This just helps me to not overdo this with this too many different state properties. So we need to modify the web view. So I don't have these two independent properties, I just have one. Because this is the one that passes data back and forth. This needs to be a bindable or one of these property wrappers. So now the URL comes from the WebView state. And because I set this here to optional, I need to first check these. If this WebView state at least has something, only then I should update this. And here I need to do the same. So this is guard-let URL is the WebView state's URL, else I return early. Then I load this and I can set and update this WebView state to say the loading is true. Similar here, now I use this WebView state, update is loading true. When I'm here finished, I'm setting this updating to false. And when I'm here in the error case, I set the error to the error that I'm getting here, and is loading is false. So now I actually pass the error downwards, or upwards in this case, from this one web view upstairs to the SwiftUI value, and then we can use this in this reading detail view. So here, else if error is the web source error. I probably also should reset my error states. So here I show a text with the error's localized description and a foreground style of pink. In order to reset this error whenever I update the URL, I am just going here. Whenever somebody changes the URL, I'm setting the error to nil. We can also write this reset function. That's the other reason why I have this function here, because then probably should do this inside here. So let's do a better one and write the func update URL. So I can organize my code nicely and use this function properly, so I can update my state properties nicely. So here I would call update for this new value is URL, and on the appear I get this from the readings URL. Okay, going to this function to clean up my mess properly. Whenever I change my URL from outside, I set this internally here to this one, and I am resetting my error to be nil. Let's test this for the iPhone. And this is also for some of my previews. URL from string. Let's test this to see if I have the update still there. When I open one of these links, you see it doesn't load, and I am still calling here these update UI functions. But in this case, the way this WebView works, so the first time it calls this make UI view. In this case, it doesn't have a URL because I'm just setting this a moment later on the onAppear after it already appears. So this function won't actually do what it's supposed to do. Then it calls the update UI view function, where it checks the current URL of this view, which is nil. In this case, I didn't load anything initially, so it will stop and again not load anything. Now if the UI view's URL is nil, then I load the new one. I have the current view, and now I'm comparing them. And only if they're not the same, then I'm loading this. So let's see if I did this correctly now. There's a lot of do I have thing or not. So we're loading and seeing these updates. And I do the same for the iPad. That's the thing with these views. If you do too much, like I started to do now, with back and forth, then you need to slowly go through the updates and think of what you actually did. So this page loads, I go to this one loads, and then I go to this one. So we're loading properly, and I can also navigate to different pages here. Now when I navigate to another page, I actually also want to know this, and we actually can find out which pages we loaded, because here on did finish, I can just check what's the current URL. When I finish loading, I know the URL of this, and we can just have a look. So I run again, select something. Here at the end I see that this is the one that I'm actually wanted to load. And now I go to blogs and another page, and you see this is then the new URL that we're having. So I can actually track what the user is doing by always getting the information of this URL and calling this at the right moment, which is exactly at this WebView point. So because I want to also do something in the view above in a minute, I am going to update this class here to have a current URL. This is optional URL and initially is null. So we can keep track of what's the current URL and what's the one that I'm setting from the reading items. So now this is the update that I call to navigate to this URL. So this, maybe I rename these. User requested to open URL. And then down here I add another update function. This update is then the current ones. Here, when I change my is loading finished, I can also update this URL to show the URL of this web view. This might be null, so I'm changing the function. I'm just going to allow here to say that something is null. As a little experiment, I want to now see these two URLs in my UI. So in the reading detail view, this is the one where I have all this information. After the Z stack, I'm adding here a V stack. We have two texts of the current URL, of the URL that I have from this reading item, and the web view's current URL. And I'm just adding here a background of color.yellow to increase the contrast so I can actually see something. And this is otherwise showing empty. And this is also showing an empty string. I select something. You see there's only one URL, now I have two of them. We should make this a bit bigger. Now I go somewhere else. It updates both of them. Then I navigate here inside of these to a different section. And you see now I have two different URLs. This also reminds me that if I change the main URL, I should update the current URL. It's part of this resetting here when I do the URL. The arrow, this is in self.current URL, is also nil. So the whole reason why I wanted to do this is in the detail view. I can use this information to say, oh yeah, actually I can also create a new reading item for you from this new URL. And I'm going to do this in the toolbar here. This is a button, create new reading. And where do I actually do this? In the reading list view. Here I had another button where I created this editor. And here, in order to create a new reading item, I passed this title and string value to my ViewModel to this add new reading item function. So this is the function that I'm also going to use. Maybe adding one where I directly here can do the URL. So this is func add, similar to this one before, just in this case I use a URL directly because I have the URL from the web view. So this is then this part. And I can from the other function also call this function title and URL. This ViewModel also has the information of the reading item, so this is the one I need to update. And we need to pass this information from the content view where I have this down to my detail view here. So this is what I have to pass. This is one of these bindings. So my detail view. I also want to have this information. This is at bindable var of type reading. Updating this in my previews. Go back and now here in content view, I need to pass this again. So now this detail view has access to this information and can actually update this. So I'm passing a reference, this ViewModel downwards. I can change this on this subview and then this is propagated to the topmost level because this is then having the same data and then show it here in the reading list. So I can do the data passing up and down between these different views in the hierarchy. So the main point was in the reading detail view. When I here press create, first of all, I only want to have this if my WebView's URL is not my WebView states current URL. And now I can tell my ViewModel to add a new reading item with the title and the URL that I have here. So if I have something and if this new is not the old one, then I create a new item. Now additionally, what do I set for this title? And you can actually, in this web view, ask the web view for the title of this page. So here I can also update this in this function and we can track what's the current title. So this is var current title string empty. So here I can also say current title and then set this to my self.current title. So here when I actually call this, I can use the information from the web view's title. This is actually optional. Wait, maybe I use this optional. So this can be an optional string and this can be also an optional string. Okay, so I have the information and in my web view, in my detail view, when I create this now, I can use the web view states title, or if I don't have anything, I use the default title. We could also show an editor. Okay, the whole point was when I build and run again, I select something, we go here, these two are the same, now I go to a different blog post. These two URLs are different and I have now this one toolbar item. I create this new item, I pass this information with this ViewModel and you see on the left this item coming up in this list. Okay, I'm going to delete here this little overlay. What I did so far is mostly work with this one ViewModel or just pass this information back and forth. In some cases, it might be advantageous to keep a reference to the actual view underneath. For example, if I want to navigate back and forward, this is with these two buttons. I want to now have this toolbar button at the bottom. I create two buttons here for go backward and forward. And in order to do this, I need to have a reference weak var to this web view, WKWebview, which I can need to here import WebKit and WebView. I need to attach this, so when I make this view here, I can say that my WebView states WebView is this view. So now I can track also from the state and could do things from there directly. For example, I can add functions here to take this WebView and say go backward. This will navigate backwards. I can go forward or reload. Now, in order to disable these two buttons for go backward and forward, I actually need to check the WebView if I can go backward and forward. So I need to create another function to check what the WebView can go backward or forward to update these properties that I can use for these buttons. And these I always need to do when I update something. So when I call here one of these update functions, like here when I have a new current URL. Okay, now I go to the web reading detail view. Below my main content, I'm now going to add this one line with this text field. So below here, I create a vstack, and in here, I create a hstack. These go both forward and backward buttons. So I always use the web view to go backward. This is the function that we just created, or go forward, and I use the state properties to disable this. Because I want to also have this text field where you see this, I am going to create here a extract to file. Oh, this one I am extracting and putting in a separate file. And maybe I'm also moving this one to this web view. So this is new file from template, SwiftUI view, where I show the web navigation bar. So I move this over here, and we need to again pass this web view state. I need to get access to this web view state as a binding because I want to change something. Additionally, I wanted to show the current URL. This is an optional, and this text field I want to actually modify a little bit, so I'm creating a separate state property. Now I need to update these again to connect these two. So I have to do the same thing with onChange and onAppear. OnAppear, I'm setting the current URL to the web view's initial URL. This bar I am now going to use next to my main view, and we can test this. So you see the URL down here. Now this is squeezed a little bit, so you can always add padding. And the other thing is, per default, the truncations is at the end, but you can set the truncation mode to be in the middle. So we see the beginning of the URL and the end, which is usually what you want to have to understand if you see the right thing. So one of these longer URLs you see here down here, and I'm going to change the text field style to rounded border. Now the main thing is, if I navigate to another view, you see this button is disabled, and I can actually go back and forward now between these different pages. So it's really web viewer in this case. You might want to change the location of these or the styling. For example, I can change the address ignore safe area to bottom, and then I'm adding here transparent background. So this is thin material. So now it's a little bit transparent behind. In this case, we get a lot of information and pass values quite a lot between the levels of UIView and SwiftUI. For the most part, most of the information that I have is in this one class here, this WebView state, where I check if I'm loading, if I have an error, what's the current URL, current title, if I can go backward and forward, and I can even reference the actual underneath UIKit view. This is a convenience class where I add a lot of functions that I might want to do that properly updates everything, so my data flow is correctly and I handle these states correctly. The main thing is, when you work with UIKit views is that you have to conform to this UIViewRepresentable. So in this case, I have the most simplest version is you implement a make UIView and update UIView. If you work on iOS, you might just want to use the make UIView. The thing is, especially in this case, which is much more complicated than you probably will use in other cases, I need to work with the data flow of, I'm updating this, so now this has to happen, and I should not create here this reference cycle of, because I updated when all these properties that you have in this UIViewRepresentable will cause this update UIView function to be called, so everything will be updated again and again. And because of these delegate here, I update my state and I update this view, then I update the delegates. So you need to be really careful and slowly think through what is called at which positions. But once you get through this, you can do quite a lot of customizations for what you want to show and what you want to see. In the function make UIView, you create this new UIKit view. In this case, it's a WKWebview. You customize it and you return it. In this case, I added here a delegate. In the update functions, you can change properties of these views. For example, I can reload different URLs in this case. In the next part of the series, I am going to extend on this. So we have here these web views, and I will add the ability to export these web pages as PDF. And these PDFs, this is now here, this nice success view, will be stored in a way that we can see them from the Files app. So this is the folder that is created for my application. And in here, I have now this new PDF that we can open again. In addition, you will also see how to access this documents directory and see all the files that are in there, all the PDFs. So in our app, we can also show them and add a little PDF viewer. Again, for this, I will have to work with UIViewRepresentable, but it's going to be much easier. This does not have any interactions or callbacks or anything. So we can use this again, working a little bit more with files and PDFs. In this case, there's more about files again, how to store and read data. I can also add the ability here to delete these files. If you want to follow me along on the next part of the series, you can find the link up here. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss any further tutorials. Until next time, happy coding!